Yeah, I'm gonna get ready. It's getting ready to live stream to YouTube, so if you just give us a minute here, that's
Sure.
be good.
Absolutely. Jim can eat potato chips. Cool it for a minute.
You could have gotten the food from the other place.
My chicken salad is good. We're okay?
Yep.
Okay, so we're good with that, and we'll go into the pledge of allegiance. Y'all go into the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Ashby? Mr. Butler?
Here.
Mr. Curry?
Present online.
Mr. Henderson?
Here.
Mr. Heisman?
Here.
Mr. House? Mr. Hoffman? Senator Lamar? Mr. McCullough?
Here.
Mayor Moody?
Here.
Mayor Sisson, can you hear us?
Did you say Sisson?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Yes, I'm here online.
Thank you. Ms. Smith?
Here.
Ms. Taylor? Here. Mr. Underwood? Here. Mr. Voorhees?
Present.
Mr. Wood? Here. And Mayor Catlin, did you join?
Who? Yes.
Well, before we get into approving the agenda, I would like to welcome Mayor Sisson to the meeting today from the town of Clay. Couldn't go, but we're glad she's here electronically, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Next is approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to the agenda which was distributed prior to the meeting? I don't think it. Yeah, I'll entertain a motion to approve. Okay, any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Public comment. Are there any members of the public here today that wish to address the commission? Alternatively, comments might have been requested prior to the meeting via email. Patrick, were there any comments received?
There were no comments received.
Okay, moving right along. In the presentation, regional housing study. Next, we have a presentation of the draft regional housing study. If you recall, the from Virginia Housing, formerly VHDA, late last year, and staff has worked with local and regional stakeholders on this study. Amy Collins with Samoan 310, the consultant for the study, is with us electronically to review the draft study. Ms. Collins, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. And I have Dan Gunderson here as well. He is the principal on the project. I'm just going to share my screen here. Can you all hear me all right? I just want to make sure about that.
Yep.
All right, great.
Well, Amy is queuing that up. Let me just say, Mr. Chairperson, the commission members, Mr. Mayor, and others, how much of a pleasure it has been to work with you on this regional housing study. So many of you have been involved with individual interviews, helping to prepare materials, reviewing documents, so many different meetings, all the critical role that you have played has been absolutely, it's been enjoyable. In fact, I would say the level of professionalism that we have experienced working with you all has just been top notch. Patrick, you have a great team, and it's been fun to work with you. What we're going to do today is we're going to move quickly, but because many of you have seen this, but we have several topics we'd like to cover with you today. I'd like to get into the overall background. We'll talk about some of the tasks that were completed, the findings and the recommendations. But primarily our job here was to help prepare that comprehensive assessment of the housing situation in the 5 counties and the 8 towns. And we did this by providing a quantitative and qualitative data to the housing challenges. We examined the current land use practices, some of which help, some of which hinder some of the issues that the region is facing. And we offer today, as part of this draft strategy, recommendations for addressing these major issues. So when you look at the cheat sheet, if you will, for the need and the response in preparing the RFP as you did and contracting with us, you saw a need, the need being that the cost of housing is increasing, getting beyond the reach of so many workers in the county and those who have grown up in the county. In some cases that housing is being they're being priced out of the market, and this is something that is of great concern. There is an aging population, and that brings with it its own challenges, and the lack of attainable housing for place-based jobs. And what we mean by that is worker housing, and some of those in the service positions are unable to afford. And you'll see that in a minute in terms of the medium housing price and the income and the disparity here. And we wanted to update some of the regional data. Some of that had not been done since, I believe, 2006. And so again, what we did here in response, we provide you with the baseline data analysis. The stakeholder interviews yielded phenomenal information that was very helpful. We're able to then assess the demand. We looked at the zoning and the ordinances, and we provide the strategy. Now, I'm really the warm-up act because the real rock star of this whole project has been Amy, and you all know Amy. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy to walk us through rather briskly the report that we have prepared for you.
Great, thanks, Dan. Yeah, but I would just echo Dan's comments. It's really been a pleasure to work with Patrick and the commission and all of the localities over, I guess, 7, 8, 9 months. We started this pretty much at the same time all of this COVID nonsense started, and just it's been very easy to navigate the whole process, and yeah, it's been an enjoyable process. So let me get started. So I think it's important to kind of ground the whole study and why housing is important, especially in terms of other community and economic development initiatives that are happening all across the region. So really, you know, when we look at why housing is important, we see that it better enables businesses to attract and retain workers, right? So if there's housing available, you're more likely to get the right kind of worker, and if it's close by to businesses, then commuting is easier, and other involvement in the community is easier, which gets into this next bullet point here. So it helps ensure that there's residents to support school enrollment and local volunteer organizations, community group membership, et cetera. These are people that are going to be joining the PTA, running Little League games. You really need, it just helps support an overall lively community environment. Establishes a larger customer base for businesses, especially year-round residents that can support a business throughout the year. And it housing really helps create a stronger sense of place that's attractive to both current and potential residents. I think, so one thing I just wanted to point out here is we looked at the top occupations in the region. So these are the people that are working within the region. And the top occupations are, the 5 top ones are cashiers, fast food workers, retail salespeople, office clerks, and landscaping workers. And combined, like the average wage for these top 5 occupations is $26,500 annually. And that is compared to a household income of about $82,000 that's needed to really afford the median priced home in the region. So that's based off the current sales data. So I just think that shows a pretty significant discrepancy between what the housing stock that exists and the people that are living throughout the region. So now I'm just going to get into the findings from each of the sections of our report. So first, to start off, just high level from the baseline data analysis. I don't think any of this information really will surprise anybody here. There's an aging population. These first 2 bullet points, there's an aging population and an uneven population growth throughout the region. Typically, Fauquier, Culpeper, Orange counties, those are the ones with the highest population growth. And then Rappahannock and Madison are showing relatively flat growth since around 2003. In terms of age, Madison and Rappahannock also tend older than the other counties. So that's one piece of information I don't think is shocking to anybody. The rate of outcommuting for work has been increasing steadily. This is now 64% of people who live in the region also work outside of the region, and this has steadily increased since 2002, when it was 56% of the people who lived in the region and worked outside of the region. So this points to a need to work outside of the region in order to earn those incomes in order to be able to afford a home inside the region. There's a low rental vacancy rate throughout the region. This is just 3%, which is indicative of really a pressing need for rental units. Typically, we like to see a rental rate around 10%. And the other thing is single family units dominate the housing stock in the region. And that's what this pie chart here shows. This big blue chunk, 95% of these structures permitted between 2000 and 2018 were single family units. So that just is indicative of a very homogeneous type of housing stock throughout the region. All right, so the housing demand analysis. So here we looked at, we see that there's a significant increase in the housing demand in the past 5 years. And so the number of units sold increased by about 22%. The median price change has also increased throughout the region. And the average days on the market throughout the past 5 years has also decreased. It decreased about by over 50% over the last 5 years. So that shows that there's really a significant increase in housing demand throughout the region. New construction is largely for single family homes, as I just said, and the number of structures permitted. There's some market response that we indicated through the interviews and learning about different townhomes and senior living facilities that are being developed and coming on the market, but there's just not enough of that happening. And based on the population growth projections, if we were to house everybody in the region based on this population growth, it would increase the housing by about 20%, which is pretty significant in the next 20 years. And the largest demand by age is for those age 65 and up. And then when we look at cost burden, so these are people spending more than 30% of their income on home costs. About 1/3 of homeowners are cost burden and 40% of renters are cost burden. And then this chart I just pulled out of the executive summary report because I think it highlights the basically the mismatch between the income of resident households and the median price of homes at current selling prices. So this just, we just looked at the median price per county and throughout the region. And then we calculated the resident household income based on average household size and average earnings per worker. And you see here that there's a deficit no matter where you live in the region. It's as low as around $11,000 in Fauquier County and as high as $22,000 in Rappahannock. So I just thought that was important to pull out. And then this is just a summation of the housing demand for new units. So in sum, there's about 4,600 housing unit need for right now and in the near future, based on the population change and based on the underhoused population. And we define the underhoused population as those aged 18 to 34 who are not living with a spouse or a partner or by themselves. So they're living with their parents, or they're living with other relatives, or they're living with a group of people. And we just took a conservative proportion of those people, thinking that they would want a rental unit if it was available. So that's what this chart on the left here shows, and it's broken down by income level. And then the chart on the right-hand side just shows the number of cost burden households by income level throughout the region. And this represents about 24% of the region's households. So about 15,000 households are paying more than 30% of their income on housing. So that's pretty significant. All right, moving along. So the zoning ordinance review, this was a pretty cursory look at the zoning codes within localities that wanted to have this done. I believe we looked at 8 localities in total. And we looked at practices that I should have put the word may in here, practices that may encourage attainable housing and practices that may hinder attainable housing. And so we looked at things like inclusionary zoning, requiring a certain number of units to be for a lower income level, incentives and bonuses, allowing for flexibility, fee waivers, priority to attainable housing developers, and overlay zoning that provides incentives for certain types of housing and a variety of resident types. And in general, the variety of resident types existed in all of the zoning codes. And overlay zoning was another popular practice, and also incentives were also used pretty consistently, not everywhere, but in a lot of places throughout the region. We also looked at the minimum buildable lot size, density requirements, setbacks, parking requirements, and open space requirements. In general, these all reduce the land that can be built on, which potentially can then drive up the cost per unit. So thinking about how those could be either waived or reduced in a way that a developer can build more units per lot to make it more cost effective for them to then pass those cost savings on to a potential tenant. That's the idea of getting behind these other practices. All right. So then we pulled the data together from the baseline analysis and the interviews and the housing demand analysis, and we came up with these 4 goals that really create the framework around our strategy recommendations. So increase and preserve the supply of attainable housing, address perceptions of growth in attainable housing, address maintenance needs, and alleviate substandard housing stock, and then examine and adapt existing land use protocols. So I'm going to quickly go into each of these. So I'm just going to talk about the strategies that encompass each of these goals. Not going to get too much into the specific actions, but just because that would take too long, and you have that in your packet already. All right. So the strategies under the first goal to increase and preserve the supply of attainable housing. So first, we want to understand what units already exist and work with the property owner to keep these units at attainable rates. So this might be a transferring ownership to tenants in order to keep them affordable, or creating a right of first refusal agreement in order to have a nonprofit entity or another organization purchase the building in order to keep it at an affordable rates. 1.2, encourage more senior housing based on demographic need. It's clear that there is definitely a need for more senior housing. So encouraging universal design principles that will meet not only senior households, but a range of other, basically everybody. Having a co-housing program that links seniors with other seniors to encourage like a group housing environment, and then other incentives to encourage more senior housing. And then 1.3, increase the number of attainable units throughout the region. So this, there's different tactics under this strategy, such as creating inventory of underused or vacant buildings, creating overlay zones, allowing for slightly higher density in areas for owner-occupied units, and then also utilizing a community land trust model, which an organization owns the land which the house sits on, and then the homeowner just owns the value of the home, which reduces the cost of home ownership for that person or household. Number 2, address perceptions of growth and attainable housing. This is really kind of the marketing goal. So it's basically about creating and implementing a marketing plan. So taking preventative measures so that changes can be accepted more readily as you progress through implementing some of these recommendations. Really understanding what are the talking points that you want to present to a community or potentially an organization that really is against housing that might create slightly more dense housing or more affordable price points. Sometimes there can be a negative connotation with affordable housing or low-income housing. And so really trying to get ahead of that. And that's what we're trying to do here with this goal. Excuse me. Okay. Goal number 3, address maintenance needs and alleviate substandard housing stock. So this first one, 3.1, there's a lot of efforts already underway throughout the region. And so we recommend, promoting these existing efforts and making homeowners aware of these existing programs. So this also kind of plays into that marketing of existing projects and programs that are already happening. 3.2, so this is working with property owners to bring their housing into compliance if it's not, and trying to work with them cooperatively, providing them with different programs and resources that they might be they might be able to link up with. And what this looks like will be different throughout the region, depending on the capacity within each locality and really the approach that each locality wants to take. And then 3.3, just identifying additional innovative methods. So this could be volunteer partnerships with fraternal organizations to do housing projects, to create a ramp for somebody, or help paint paint a house, taking advantage of energy efficiency programs, and also taking advantage of the USDA Rural Development 504 rehabilitation program that provides rehabilitation funds for those house owners in rural communities. So finally, the last one, examine and adapt existing land use protocols. And this goal really gets behind and supports the process that each locality has to go through anyway of updating its comprehensive plan. So really, and throughout the process, we've learned that some localities are waiting for the data from this report in order to incorporate that into their comprehensive plan, and that some are kind of in process, some have already done it, some need to do it. So this really supports that effort by examining existing land use protocols and listening from the community what the vision is for housing in each particular locality, and updating the comprehensive plan accordingly, which aligns with that community vision through a housing chapter, and then aligning the zoning with the comprehensive plan update based on the comprehensive plan's goals and strategies that are identified there. And then 4.4, additional housing policies and practices. This really gets into a suite of different ideas that are both best practices that are happening across the country and also things that are happening within the region that could be practiced in other places throughout the region. So it's looking at reducing the tap fees for multifamily developments, or having a policy for allowing more auxiliary dwelling units, or evaluating land that's zoned commercial that could potentially be zoned for higher density residential or mixed use, or conduct an audit of permitting processes. So this is, I don't want to say it's a catch-all strategy, but it's basically a list of ideas that could be investigated in the future. So those are the 4 goals and the general strategies that accompany each goal. I wanted to end this with really trying to put myself in your position as commissioners, and really what do you now do with this information, and how do you prevent this from just sitting on a shelf somewhere, which is what happens to a lot of plans, let's be honest. So I think it's really important to take the information, especially the executive summary report, and get the word out and really connect with your board members and different community partners, and not just send out an email blast and say, hey, we just finished up this report, but really let this lead a discussion in order to, how can we best utilize the information in this report to now move forward? How does this support other initiatives that we're already doing in our community? Basically, really using this as a talking point for next steps and for action. The second bullet point, focus on short-term tasks. In the executive summary report, there are timelines associated with each action. And I know Patrick has been looking at some of those already and seeing how his team can work on getting those implemented, or just starting the ball rolling on those. Because there's a lot of strategies in this report, and so focusing on the short-term tasks to complete really just helps orient what can be done first. And then collaboration and education. I feel like I say this all the time. Really understanding who your partners are in terms of housing, nonprofit, for-profit, state partners, and getting the word out about this report, and using it as a tool to both listen to concerns of the community and educate them on what the actual housing situation is, and why it's important to have a diversity of housing, and how that supports implementing community values that your region is looking for. So I'm going to stop talking now. That was a lot of me talking. So I am ready for some question and answers. Actually, I'll just stop sharing my screen. And I'm happy to answer, Dan and I are happy to answer questions or any comments, even after this as well.
Thank you.
Sure, I can just make a few comments just on the process and also just where we are in terms of internally at the staff level. As Amy and Dan said, I think the process went pretty well. The first meeting we had for this stakeholders was March 17th, and that was, as you all remember, I think that was our first introduction to a Zoom meeting. Excuse me, I remember talking with Amy and trying to figure out, okay, who has a Zoom account that we can use, that we can jump in on. Little did we know 7 months later that it would be, just everybody's perfectly comfortable with it. It's like we've been using it for years. But one of the concerns ahead of time was, are we going to be able to, engage with partners, engage with the local planning staff, the local administrative staff, and then some of the housing, realtors and people like that. And I think we did a good job of that. I think Amy, even though she was not on the ground here in the region as we initially thought in terms of field visits, the interviews that we were able to do with the realtors, with Greater Piedmont realtors, with some other local realtors, the data they were able to provide, the interviews we were able to do with a lot of the nonprofit housing developers, people incorporated, Windy Hill, some of the other ones that Foothills Housing Corporation, that have been active, if not, large in terms of the number of projects they have, but they have been the most active in the region. So that was something that was a concern going in, but that going through the process was not a concern at the end. The other thing I would say is that I very much think this is sort of the first housing sort of study and data collection process that has been done in the region. This is not, I would very much say that this is not an answer to everyone if they think there's a housing problem, if they don't think there's a housing issue, but it provides some springboard to begin those discussions. Look at housing from a regional, but also again at each local housing level that might be able to be done. So I'd be glad to answer questions from the staff perspective, or if you have questions for Amy on that study.
I skimmed through the report and tried to zero in on solutions, but could you give us more details about employers and their concerns about being able to keep employees in the region because of the lack of housing opportunities and long commutes and that sort of stuff? Anecdotal stuff we ought to hear about that? Or...
Yeah, so let me just repeat the question so I made sure I understood it correctly. So you just wanted more information on the impact from that a lack of housing might be having on employers. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So we didn't do, in housing studies we've done in the past, we sometimes do a employer survey. And so that helps us get a really good understanding of what's happening on the ground with employers. And we do that typically we do that when the economy tends to be more tourism-based or seasonal, when you need a large amount of seasonal housing at any one time. That wasn't necessarily the case in this region. And in terms of interviews, I didn't interview employers per se, but I interviewed a lot of other people that are working with employers. And I didn't really hear specifically, I'm trying to think. I mean, I guess, let's see. I did talk to a property owner that has, I forget how many apartments they had, but it was definitely like people were driving yeah, I guess I don't really have a lot of anecdotal data on specific employer impacts.
But what we can say all across the nation, what we are seeing is economic development organizations struggling with this very same problem that you're facing about the lack of affordable housing. And how does that attainable housing, let's say that, how does that play out for keeping employment, keeping the base? It does. Because if you're trying to attract a major employer, there are a variety of positions that are going to be needed within that business. And at the lower end, you're going to have more of a difficult time trying to attract the employees. But that's what we need to do, but they need to have the housing nearby. This plan did include some analysis on commute patterns, and we do know that nationally that most employers like to see a 40-minute labor shed or under. That is the distance that anybody would want to travel or can travel each way to a job. You want it to be less than 40 minutes. In this case, the residents are traveling greater distances than that. So it's a stress as well on the existing residents who have to go elsewhere to get to their places of employment. So as an economic developer, you want to ask, what can we do to have that employment base here, closer to home, within our counties? And one of the ways in which you can do that is to have that diversity of housing for the diversity of workers that are going to be needed. And where that diversity does not exist, those are the areas that economic development organizations are finding they're being looked over by site selection consultants and corporate real estate executives.
I think if I might comment as well, one thing I would say is that looking at the existing residents that are in existing housing, but that are an asset that potentially also allows you to look at what's the time between the housing they can find here, but the towns that they're taking to Northern Virginia, Charlottesville, or Fredericksburg, and are there things that can be done to change the employment equation here, or to encourage entrepreneurship or business creation here, and then again following the
Questions, a couple of other trends in the last few years. One, did you study the impact of the increase of vacation housing? I know in Culpeper County, we've seen houses that used to have very little of the stock was Airbnb or VVRO or whatever. Now, not only is it a significant component of the stock, especially outside of standard neighborhoods, but you even have competition on the buying side where people are rolling up several and creating small management companies for houses throughout the hills in Culpeper. Have you looked at how that impacted affordable housing?
Yeah, we looked at, we look at both the seasonally vacant houses. So these are houses that people only occupy a certain amount of the time. We looked at the change in those, and we also looked at the change of short-term rentals. So yeah, the Airbnb folks, and that it's in the baseline data analysis. That's where the specific data is. I believe it's increased throughout the whole region. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I think it's upwards of 40 or 50% increase in the number of short-term rentals throughout the region. And
over what period of time is the 40% increase?
That was 2 years.
Yes, I think that's right. About 4,000% over the last decade. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, what that does is oftentimes an owner of such property can realize greater profit than sometimes renting out. And so it's depleting the overall supply for full-time residents, which has clearly indirect economic impact as well, because you don't have those residents then who are patronizing all the small businesses throughout the community. Instead, you have short-term renters and seasonal that may only have a limited use of some of those businesses.
You project the trend to continue, and are there any recommendations as to changes in locality policy relative to it?
I didn't quite hear that. It's a little bit jarbled. I heard something about recommendations on policies, but I didn't know if it was something more specific.
Amy, I think the question was if you project the Airbnb and the short-term rental numbers to increase or to continue to increase, and if so, then are there recommendations for local policies that might, address that, or might, use, I don't want to say combat that, but just to address that increase?
I mean, what we're seeing across the country in terms of managing Airbnb or short-term rentals in general, is creating just an inventory and making sure that these are registered so that each locality is aware of like who's doing what where, so that there's a little bit more control and understanding of what's happening just on the local level. In terms of limiting them, that's a really dicey area to get into. There's talk of limiting or having a maximum number of days that something can be rented, but still that doesn't really impact or help increase the amount of year-round housing stock. So there's some policies around them, but in terms of actually helping to create more year-round housing stock in the community, that's where it doesn't quite line up.
I think the commission can follow up on too. I mean, Orange County has a patients and the other counties have that inventory that licensing requirements in place. And I think that's something all further than
And the issues you raised in your report, the ones that are really good, and I think this is going to be very helpful for those of us in Madison County when it comes to raising this housing problem, because everybody thinks we have a housing problem, but nobody can really describe what the problem is in some uniform and thoughtful ways. So I think it's been very good, but the data is on a regional level. And our problem is we're working inside our borders. And so we have to take the framework and boil it down as it applies to Madison County. So if you look at the feedback on your report, that's one struggle that each of us are going to have to overcome, is take a regional report and translate it to our individual jurisdictions. My question is, you guys go across the world and look at different communities. Are there clear opportunities or clear problems that we have that you might not see in other areas, or are our problems common to everywhere?
I heard the first part of the question. I'm sorry, I'm just having a hard time hearing the specifics, so I can answer really.
Unique in any significant way, in that do we have unique problems or unique opportunities that we might know about, or our problems the same as everybody else's?
Amy, I think the question is, are their problems unique, or are other areas experiencing the same, and what do we learn from that?
No, this is not a problem that's isolated to Madison County or any of the localities. This is a nationwide, worldwide problem, and there is no silver bullet. And it's not, I would say it's not even just an issue of dealing with the kind of housing ecosystem. So the supply, the demand, the building costs. It also has to do with things like wages and just general land use thought processes and different kind of cultural norms around what the American dream is, right? You know, everyone wants this single family house with a little yard, and that's great, but is that really, like, how realistic is that, given that construction prices are just skyrocketing in the last 6 months, and you know, and wages are remaining stagnant for the last 30 years while the cost of housing has gone up. So it's been a problem. It's probably going to be a problem for a while, and I think it's just a matter of incrementally trying to educate your constituents about what the actual problem is, why a diversity of housing is needed, and trying to work through some of those potential negative stereotypes that might be associated with higher density housing or low income housing or affordable housing, right? All these terms that kind of potentially can shy people away from different types of housing, and really just kind of and also celebrating and acknowledging where it has worked, where apartment buildings are creating more lively neighborhoods, and where accessory dwelling units can provide a senior housing residence for, you know, somebody's grandparents. So it's about all these little things kind of coming together. Yeah, it's not, I wish I could wave a magic wand and make sure everybody had safe and secure housing, but it's not that easy.
Thank you, Amy.
Yeah.
Well, at this point, staff will seek comments and review from regional stakeholders and anticipate the commission will consider adoption in December meeting. Thank you, everybody. Next is approval of the minutes. Minutes from the August 26th meeting are included in your packet. Are there any changes requested?
I was active. I'm just changes, but
Anyone else? I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes as amended. Okay. Financial report. Item 9A is the draft audit report completed by Dunn, Alcomp, and Rose. Traditionally, the commission receives the audit in October and takes action in December. Patrick, are there any specific comments you want to make regarding the fiscal year 2020 audit?
What I would say, just very briefly, is that the auditors were in at the beginning of September and found it was a clean audit as we come to expect. Terry Sneed is in the room with us here. Appreciate all of her hard work and pulling the information together. And again, clean audit. The one thing, or just the numbers that I do typically try to point out on pages 4 through about 7, and that just gets into the management message. And really the things that I would point out is that what we see is a lower revenue, and in some cases on page 5, you change the net position. There's a the revenues were lowered by almost almost 200,000. The majority of that revenue the past couple of years, that has been a high number. Some of the side issues brought in a lower rate the last 2 years of RRRS. That number saw a deficit of so those numbers are sort of flexible, I would say, in terms of the overall picture. We remain in good position, thanks in large part to the guidance of the past 5 years, in terms of the overall position. And again, the net position again is on this position at the end of the year is lower, but that again was we had these operating expenses and operating revenues actually not where we expected. Nothing started from my perspective. So happy to answer questions now, or again, our next one.
Okay, thank you, Patrick. Next is this year, fiscal year 2021, financial report and request from staff for budget amendment. Patrick, will you review the first quarter financial picture and budget amendment?
Excuse me, I will. And as referenced in the memo, the cover memo for this, the financial report and the budget amendment, since the August meeting and certainly since the budget was adopted in June, we've seen some significant grant awards that the chair reviewed by email and discussions. Specifically, one is the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation grant, which is a 2-year grant, majority of which, in terms of revenue for the commission, will come through in FY 2022. We have a small amount there. We added 30,000 that we expect to draw down this year, along with the associated expenses. The larger award was from the PAC Foundation, and this is in regards to a regional transportation collaborative for the evolution of the Village Area Mobility System project that we've done the past decade. That award from the PAC Foundation, we initially applied for 40,000 to 50,000 back in February and May. Through conversations with some of their other partner agencies that they funded in the past for transportation type work, asked us to take a larger grant and to sort of coordinate with those organizations. That includes the Community Services Board, Goldstrand, which provides long-term transportation, primarily in Fauquier, but also in Rappahannock County, as well as just to kind of better align and coordinate some of the ongoing transportation, volunteer transportation availability work that's going on in the region. So that's a significant, both of those are significant awards for the commission. Those are new revenues. The other one that I would mention is my appreciation to the Orange County Commissioners for their $10,000 of the CARES Act funding that they provided to the commission, or were allocated to the commission, to support our public works and IT costs that have grown since the response to the pandemic. So those are the revenue changes. The expense changes that I'm proposing to the commission today for consideration. One is just the additional equipment and software costs in the FY 2021 budget, again, through the Orange County CARES Act funding. And then, aside from the project expenses, which are outlined in the memo, I would ask today for funding to get put into the payroll budget to restore our part-time regional planner position. This is a position that was in place until about May, when Hunter Berry has been working with us, finished his master's degree and ended up getting full employment with Stafford County Schools. And so what we found in the intervening months is that we're continuing to do the work, but there are some projects that would benefit. I think one of them being a housing study, having somebody that can do, not a full-time position, but a couple days a week to following up on some of the recommendations that may be particularly pertinent for not only the regional commission, but also any of you at the local level that may need some assistance that kind of guiding that process. So that's the request that I'm proposing and in front of you today for the budget we would allocate just under 32,000 into payroll, as well as some to FICA. And that would allow us to retire that regional planner position, a part-time position, and also proposing a 2.5% COLA increase for staff that was not given at the beginning of the adopted budget. But feel that it is something that they've earned in terms of what they've done, not really from the previous fiscal year. I'm happy to answer questions on any of the financials that, as you might imagine, report to the quarter. We're in a good position at this point so far. On the finances along with those.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the amended 2021 budget for discussion? Thank you. For a second.
Great help. Given the work that staff does.
I think I proposed November 1st.
It might be good.
Just an overall salary position. I think it's probably the best part of the problems.
That's a good idea. What happens when we, do a small COLA raise or something like that, and you do it over an extended period of time? Everything kind of gets out of whack as far as fair market out there. If there's no look see at that. And we certainly value our people. And, these were the best ones you could ever hire, the ones already working for you. And so, some people work so hard for the new ones coming in. I like to keep the old ones there. So anyway, yeah, I agree with that as well. Yeah. Any other comments? The budget amendment. Then, I don't say a roll call.
I think that's correct. And just for the benefit of those of you participating electronically still, in case you couldn't hear everything, the motion was to accept the budget amendments as proposed. There was also request from Mr. Crozier for the executive committee just at some point to begin looking at the salary levels of the staff just to make sure it's competitive and within budget and everything else as well. Are there any? I don't want to step on your toes, Chair.
No.
But are there any questions from anyone participating electronically at this point about what's been discussed or anything that I can clarify?
Fauquier County's good.
This is Chris. I'm good.
So that was, so yeah, I wasn't projecting today because
You may be,
Jack, and I have been booming to the other end.
You may be, and I may just be overly sensitive. So I'll proceed with the roll call vote. And I see we've had some people drop off on the electronics, so I'll do my best if they're not there. Skip over them. Mayor Quinn.
Aye.
Mr. Crozier.
Aye.
Mr. Eggerson.
Aye.
Mr. Heidley.
Aye.
Mr. Hahn.
Aye.
Mayor Rogan. Aye. Ms. Baker.
Aye.
Mayor Sisson.
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Voorhees? Aye. Mr. Wood?
Thank you, everybody. Next is executive.
Okay. I'm actually going to share the screen here, just so if you're participating, you don't have it up in front of you. You see the agenda items. So three things that I've highlighted, and I want to go through a couple of the kind of upcoming meetings that are happening soon. One is actually tonight. There's a total maximum daily load TMDL plan that's in the Mountain Run, but also will have some impact on, I think, on this high-end Rappahannock, there. That's an electronic meeting. DEC is hosting and taking care of this process. In the past, the commission has been involved in the management of TMDL and the planning process. DEC has decided at this point to take that internally. So unfortunately for us, it's really from about 2005 to 2016 was a significant revenue source for the commission that DEC was managing themselves. And in this case, we're participating and had conversations with our fellow county commissioners about our role for people in the rest of the commission to be also aware of that concept. The other, under environmental and natural resources, the other meeting is Thursday by Zoom. Hosting a value-added processing meeting, and this is not only with regards to work in the Congressman previously, but also bringing in some beef and meat value-added processing discussions. The Commissioner of VDAC, Dr. Hu, for now will be on the call, and we expect a good discussion. This is sort of a kickoff discussion, but we know there's some other so that's next Thursday. As requested at the Zoom meeting, I've got a draft continuity of operations plan, which I'll provide following the meeting. I'll give hard copies to those in here in attendance. Like, frankly, the test out some of our functionality. One of which that was not functional at the beginning was the mobile and laptop availability for staff. And so that, again, with that CARES Act funding from Orange County, is the main use of those funds to make staff more mobile, give them the option and the ability to work away from the office at the time. I don't anticipate moving to any sort of full-time telework policy, but I do anticipate having that flexibility and once we're back into being out at meetings in your localities, that additional flexibility for staff to be out and on the road. Let's see, the other meeting I want to highlight, and I'll get into this a little bit in the next agenda item, is again with that PATH funding for the Regional Transportation Collaborative. There's a kickoff and introductory meeting tomorrow afternoon at 1 o'clock with a lot of the transportation and mobility providers in the region and the other partners that we're working with on that process. And the last thing I'll say is just there's a couple of links in the director's report. One is just the commission's annual report, and this is normally something that we print into hard copy, which we will do, but at this point we have a digital version that's clickable on our website. This is just kind of going through the highlights from last fiscal year for all the programs that we have. My thanks to Kristen and Raza in our office that kind of put all this together and design. And everybody contributed, but certainly in terms of the design and the graphics and things, this is sort of all that goes through there. So feel free to click through with the link once you're back at the computer. If you're in the office, and we will have hard copies available. That probably does this meeting. The other one that's included there, the link is for biennial report on planning. Main use that the commissioner might find in that report is the summary projects that each PDC submits and includes in there. Not so much from finding out what we've done, but more so from what the other PDCs have done, just in case you're more work for us to do. That might give you some ideas of some of the ways that PDCs are utilized across the state. So I would suggest again, kind of looking through that when we have an opportunity. I think that's the highlights. The other, let me make sure I put on the 3 bullet points there. The upcoming meetings, the community post on having operations. Yeah, those are the 3 things I really highlight for you. I can answer questions.
Thanks, Patrick. Next is staff updates. Item 11A is an update on the Regional Transportation Collaborative Project and Foothills Area Mobility System and FAM's call center funding. Patrick.
Yes, sir. If you recall, some of you that were here last October or were in our boardroom last October, I gave a presentation on the sort of the funding changes and sort of the funding streams related to the Foothills Area Mobility System. This is the program that the commission is the grantee and the fiscal agent for, and the contract work through the Community Services Board for the FAMS call center, which provides transportation information and referral. We've seen decreasing state and federal grant funding over the past couple of years. We've sort of stabilized that in terms of what state and federal funds will fund for us, and that equates to a half a position at the commission, which is tied in also with some other funding for rideshare, and then 1.5 positions at the call center. Last fall, the PATH Foundation stepped up and came through with the other funding for that half position at the call center to make it 2 full-time. And this year, through the Regional Transportation Collaborative funding that we received from them, that's incorporated in there. So we've sort of stabilized the staffing at a level that we're fairly comfortable with. But what I would say is that the PATH funding that we received allows us to kind of evolve the FAMS program into something a little bit more beyond just the traditional partnership of the Commission and the Community Services Board. And so the 1-page document that's there in your agenda just sort of outlines exactly where we think we're going with this. It's really tying in a lot of the work that we've already done through the call center and through our mobility program. One thing I'll say, over the past 2 to 3 years, we have incorporated a database software at the call center that has collected a lot of useful data for us in terms of making the case not only to state and federal funding agencies, but also to PATH Foundation in terms of the data that we're able to collect, in terms of the gaps we're able to identify. So I think that's one of the main things that we've been able to do is start to figure out, okay, we're providing or coordinating this number of rides through volunteer transportation at the Community Services Board or through Voltran or through Rapid Rides and the other ones, FlowLink in the region. But where are the gaps to be found? We know there are some gaps that public transit that's operated by regional transit is just not going to address. And so this is sort of a way to kind of fill the gap between volunteer transportation and public transportation that we see. What I would say is the Regional Transportation Collaborative, in addition to those positions at the Community Services Board and the coordinating position at the Commission, we're also bringing in Aging Together, which is coordinate a lot of volunteer recruitment activities and outreach. Again, Voltran, which has a coordinator position that is in charge of coordinating their rides, but also doing volunteer recruitment and outreach. And then we've got some funding where we're sort of looking at, okay, what are the agencies or what are the nonprofit organizations in the region that may jump in and be able to provide additional capacity and additional leverage for this program. We've got, for the meeting tomorrow, we've got those hospitals represented. We've got 3 clinics in, I think, Orange, Fauquier, and Health Effort in Madison as well, participating. So we're really trying to look at this from a holistic perspective and not just leave it as, okay, we've got a program and a call center that's available. What are the real ways that we can address some of the common problems that we've seen in volunteer transportation, especially. So what I would say is, if there are questions, I can answer the high-level questions. If you have specifics or if you're interested in further detail, I will connect with Kristen in our office, who's really overseeing the move from just information and referral and having a phone number to the type of data collection that really utilize to kind of build the program. Hopefully provide better services and better coordination with some of those nonprofits and some of the other partners that are providing services and stuff. again, happy to answer questions on that, but did want to give you that feedback and that update. One thing I would say on the PATH funding is that while it's not, set in stone, I think PATH looks at a program like this as one that has some sustainability and wants to see this succeed. So we do expect to receive some follow-on funding. It might not just be a one-time funding solution for this year, and so we do expect that to continue, assuming there's positive progress made in terms of the program. In terms of the work we're doing next year. So we feel comfortable.
Okay. Moving on to new business, item 12A is a request for Regional Commission's assistance on USDA Regional Conservation Partnership Program grant application. Some of you may remember this topic from last October. Patrick?
Yes, and that is exactly right. Again, this was something we talked about a year ago. The Regional Conservation Partnership Program is USDA NRCS, the Natural Resources Conservation Service. They're looking for innovative projects that would get some of their funding sources that are maybe underutilized or just not utilized to the level that they would like. They're looking for innovative regional partnerships that can advance that funding. And so this was something we discussed a year ago. The partners on this are the two soil and water conservation districts in the region, which covers Fauquier County, and then Public Soil and Water District, which covers the other 4 counties, as well as Green. Piedmont Environmental Council, Friends of the Rappahannock, Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute. There's a lot of partners that are traditionally involved in water quality type projects. And I know Friends of the Rappahannock has been increasingly active in our region, the Upper Rappahannock, which is a positive. So a year ago in October, the commission did, approve staff to move forward with this project and sort of coordinate with those partners. What ended up happening was the partnership didn't feel like they'd get to a point where it was a project that could go forward, an application go forward. So we didn't submit one last year. But those conversations have continued over the following 12 months. The partners are still at the table and actually had a meeting just this past Monday to sort of firm up what we're looking at doing. And I think it is following along those lines of environmental water quality type projects. Most of the partners, again, are active, and I don't think anyone is coming into this thinking, okay, we're going to create a new organization that's going to be doing this. It's really providing some funding to existing partners to continue their good work and specifically do some additional outreach. The other thing I would say is that any participating landowner, whether that be an agricultural landowner or residential landowner, would be voluntary participation through this program, as all USDA and RCS programs are. It would be something that they have access to additional funding that would come through the region should we be successful with an application. So the request today is really just to allow us to keep working. The deadline for the applications is prior to the next commission meeting. So if there was concern, we'd like to hear those today so that we can communicate back to the project partners. But ostensibly, the commission would serve as the project coordinator, reporting on metrics and sort of coordinating with all the partners. The on-the-ground match and the funding for some of these projects would flow from NRCS to property owners and through those partner organizations. So it could potentially be a fairly large request, which is one of the things we're concerned about to get to float that money, but that would not be the case. Everyone would have separate contracts with NRCS. Again, the request is just to authorize us to keep working with our partners.
Is there a motion to that effect? Second. Is there a second? I'll second it, right? Okay. I can't, I just think the chair usually does it, but I could. Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Okay.
Are there any geographic limitations
So the question for benefit of those of you on electronic was, are there any geographic limitations in counties? And no, this would be something that would be open to, in this case, all of our 5 counties. I think the project partners, and that's a good question that I can follow up on in terms of some of their other work. For some of them, like Friends of Rappahannock, that does work on the lower Rappahannock watershed, this would be targeted specifically to the upper Rappahannock and our 5 counties. And the other thing I would say is, I say upper Rappahannock because we do some work that way, but also benchmark that we kind of James is the basic. The answer is no. Long-winded way of getting there.
Okay. More questions, comments? Then we'll do a roll call vote on that. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Okay. Any nays? All of those who don't agree, please say nay. Approved unanimously. Thank you. 12B, this is information provided regarding the potential Go Virginia grant application on regional entrepreneurship. Patrick, I understand that more information was provided for some of these, but we provide some introductory background on the project.
I think that here, just again, not with a request for action, but we certainly could take action on it today, but this is growing out of a project, a Go Virginia project that was funded through, was awarded to Fauquier County actually to oversee and coordinate. Fauquier County has been working with Rappahannock-Rapidan project. Several projects, one at Wakefield School and one at Fauquier High School, as well as a project in Orange County, to sort of facilitate and provide opportunity for youth entrepreneurship. What they've seen is a very positive result. COVID and notwithstanding the issues, you might imagine, but they've seen a positive result and feel like it's a good opportunity to expand that program. Also working with other programs in the region that are currently existing and being the partners in the East and help out with that. So what we've had is they actually reached out to the commission and asked me if I thought it would be a good fit, and I said, you want to consider a discussion and then bring it back to the commission for their consideration. So I'm introducing it to you today just as very much a high-level youth entrepreneurship program. In December, the plan would be to have the kind of lead project manager on that project. The former director of economic development in Fauquier County, Miles Friedman, is involved as well as the consultant. December meeting is slated to be in Warrington, so I think we get an opportunity to allow them to come in front of the project, but also talk through what they see the extension of that project being. So wanted to put that on your radar, especially because I know there's again some ongoing discussions about entrepreneurship in the region. Go Virginia Region 9 separately funded a rural entrepreneurship plan, which depending on timing, maybe worth getting into as well for this meeting, possibly some of the unique issues that we've seen in terms of fostering rural entrepreneurship. You know, both Mr. McCullough and Mr. Crozier on the council as well for the Region 9. We've seen projects going for Charleston and Albemarle, and we're looking at ways to find those projects that can be funded. So, just that for today.
Yes, sir.
I'll also send additional details out after.
Make sure those folks. That's right. I know, but I'm.
One thing I do have for the group is, because this is about the cigarette tax, the state finally gave the counties the authority for this, so I expect the additional help. But I just wonder what the other counties are doing in this regard. So now it's not an issue yet, but I do expect it to come up.
Thanks, Jack.
We all came in today, a little bit of work on around town. North Street, Connecticut, is how the dog is going. We expect that to be. Different things. This is the last meeting on the policy. We had a tower. Verizon has transferred assignments to Powercom, other cell phone also doing towers. It helped greatly help with the old Dunkin' Donuts is coming up in the Blue Line Shopping Center. They hope to be open before the end of the year. I don't know when that is. On Friday, we're having a Halloween truck at Street. For years, ever since I've been there, before that, we've had a Halloween for closed out Main Street kids visit. It's really fantastic. This year, because of COVID, it's been canceled. So they're going to have a drive-through at Firehouse for Friday, 47. Hey, Robbie will be hanging out there.
Gotta have costumes. No, ma'am.
I mean, this one doesn't work. Right, that's what I was thinking, yeah.
You can do that, right?
No, okay.
Probably as I'm tonight, so that's my good. I care about.
Thank you, Brody. I'm going to defer to Mr. Eggerson for the list of what's going on, but in terms of the question of taxes, I have no idea what our board will do. Me personally, I'll be voting against it, but that doesn't mean it's
So a couple of events we've had recently, the Help Up Farm Tour and Cycling Century were both massive successes for us. I think that's a function of people wanting to get outside and do things, but we had a maximum capacity of 500 riders for the cycling event. Had a lot of benefit of people being in town, hopefully eating at restaurants and whatnot. And they also host at our airport something called the Arsenal of Democracy. Basically, we serve as the base of operations for a lot of warplanes that come and then they do a flight down to Potomac. That's an annual event. Unfortunately, this year they did not get to fly because of the weather. Unfortunately, they all still arrived on Wednesday and we're there through Sunday hoping to fly, staying in our hotels and spending money. It still worked out for us. We sold a lot of fuel. CARES money was mentioned. We've given out about $2 million to small business relief and have a third round open currently, where we hope to give out the last million we have there. But we did subsequently also receive an $850,000 grant, actually with the town. It was technically the town's grant, it was a joint project, and that's for small and women and minority-owned businesses. Hopefully be propping up our businesses through this COVID stuff, and I think like everybody else, we're working on broadband expansion, and our board has directed staff to look into a child care assistance program for those parents that are struggling right now, having to stay home with the schools only operating at capacity. So we're going to be studying and looking into that. And thank you to my counterpart, Ted, over there in Orange, for sending me all the information on their program. And I guess lastly, we just closed on the refinancing of some bonds that are going to save us about $1.6 million between now and 2032. So I'm happy about the interest rates and being able to do that. I think that's all I have.
That's good.
You're going to me or to TV?
We'll get you.
Okay. Lot going on in Warrington. I think that we've still been focusing pretty heavily on our relocation, and relocating to the new town hall during COVID was a bit of a challenge, but also afforded good opportunities to us. We allowed our first big swim meet last weekend. So that was NCAP out of DC and Maryland and Virginia. And so that was a big swim meet. It was the first that we allowed. So went really well. I think the rules and procedures we put in place played out, and everyone had a great time. So to John's point, everyone was so appreciative just to have an opportunity to do something and get out, even the kids. So we didn't allow the parents in. We live streamed it using Instagram and Facebook, and then coordinated with the local restaurant. So we sent the parents there to eat and drink while the kids swam, and they actually said maybe that's something we can keep going in the future. So it worked out really well. So that just trying to ease back into things and do things. Right now, we're working on a grant program for winterization of the outdoor seating. So went and looked at what DC was doing and met with the city of Alexandria to understand some of what they're doing on their winterization. So we're putting together that program right now and finalizing that. So that's something we'll be offering to the businesses in the next coming weeks. Trying to think if there's anything else major at this point. We've got a couple of transportation projects that we're working through. One of the things on the broadband that I'm going to be bringing up as we talk about the Go Virginia grants and other things, Warrenton now is really starting to see some struggles with their own broadband. So I think that maybe as a town, we've been a little bit focused on all of the challenges in the rural part of the county, but as we see more people home and we have a 40% out commute and everyone is not out commuting and kids are home, we knew that our internet was performing below state averages already, and now we're releasing that drain. So looking at what we can start to do, and then we've been working with the county on their data initiative, so we're also looking at that. So there is some examination of that at this point, but other than that, we're kind of moving along, and I'm just ready to be back to normal like the rest of you, I'm sure. So it's good to see all of you today. I'm very thankful for the housing study. I do want to talk with Patrick a little bit. I felt we would have a little bit on the town data. Just a tiny bit more was one of the things we talked about, but I'm very thankful for the regional information. I've been kind of holding the council back on doing anything with affordable housing independently, kind of waiting for this initial report and then to build on it. So I think it's a great report, and I really appreciate your effort. Well, I'm just going to welcome you to the town of Orange, and thank you all for coming. And this is our community room, and we do rent this, but not at this time. And it is a nice facility. A lot of people use this room for many things. And right now, we even have, for instance, Habitat for Humanity holds their meetings here in the evening because it takes such a distance, and then where we just move, we can't do that. So the room is available for certain groups to get them in social distancing. This is our public works department over here behind us on that side over there. But we want to welcome you and thank you very much for the lunches. They're good, and we're glad you used the cakes and the nurse. It's an excellent place, and the folks make you know want to use that again. And Greg and I had agreed ahead of time that he would report for us. But welcome to Orange and come back anytime. We'd be glad to host you again. Thank you.
All right. Plenty going on for us as well. I think the most exciting piece of our dealing with the CARES Act came with the announcement within the last few days that we were successful in receiving a supplemental appropriation of about $2 million in the special allocation for broadband expansion. That was a sort of surprise announcement that came out, limited time offer, first come, first serve. I think 30 million, and we got 2 of it. And the only way that really worked is we were already under construction for our fiber to the home project. And so we already had crews on the ground and equipment and supplies ordered. If you're going to try to build, as our grant is going to require us to do 31 miles of fiber, you can't do it unless everything's already in place. So the CARES Act is forcing us all to do a lot of weird things, you know, a lot of gymnastics and whatever. So the only way this really qualifies is we completely shifted gears from building our fiber to the home project. We can't get all those people in line by the end of the year. I mean, that's just too short. But what we can do is stand up in partnership with 14 community organizations, churches, firehouses, et cetera. We can stand up a Wi-Fi hotspot network, and that's what we're doing. So we've shifted all our effort to do that. We built 31 miles of fiber before the end of December and put those hotspots on. We'll actually turn the first ones on next week. I think Barbersville Park is one of them. We'll turn on next week. And so if you see that on TV, that's the hocus pocus that's going on. I think one of the Charlottesville stations will probably be there next week to look at that. But what that does do is point out to the public the long-term investment and the advantage of the leadership that the board has taken on broadband. They really put a lot of money into this. They want more, which is putting a lot of pressure on the general fund. So I'm trying to,
we will be passing the
I'm trying to fight multiple battles on that front. At the end of the day, I think we all know that the private sector is not founded to be financially in their interest to serve rural America. And so we've got to figure out solutions, and it's unique to every community how that solution may work. And so in our case, we sort of had to build it alone, and we were excited that the Commonwealth has found favor upon us to finally give some money that we never qualified for. But this time we did. So that's the most exciting thing for us. Other than that, we're still working on a public safety building, which we hope to open at the beginning of the year. That'll require a number of agencies, sheriff, fire rescue, and then one to all co-locate in the same building. And then we're also moving IT in there because that's become such an intensive IT. They're our biggest IT users. So that'll all be interesting. We'll have a space where we can host you maybe next time we come to Orange County. This is a beautiful facility. We'll have a place as well. So those are the 2 biggest things. Aside from that, I'll just mention we are recruiting for 2 department director positions. So if you have an HR director, a qualified person who wants to come to Orange, or somebody's a planning and development services director, those are the 2 leadership team positions we're looking for. And pressing ahead with those, and hope to get something done in the beginning of the year.
Last Saturday, you had a wonderful event in one of our parks. Debuted the Charters of Freedom Monument display. first of its kind in Virginia. That was joint effort in the Sons of the American Revolution in the town. Parties that put that together. Very nice. In Yale Park.
And yeah,
And get a chance to see it. It really is a very, very nice display. It's put in place. We too are distributing CARES money and it's going in the town with our businesses. We have, I'm going to be ribbon cutting the other day for new business and restaurant opening. And so that's encouraging. We're still able to try to do this. And the planning commission recently signed off on the zoning application. I talked about first.
so that shows good planning because we haven't had to rezone because you got the zoning off. What's the name of the restaurant? Where's that? Or what kind of restaurant is it?
It's a sandwich shop actually on page. It's more than that.
Sure.
Yeah, you should have both people. Okay.
See, I like to know where restaurants are all around the region. A lot of your money might come from me if I know where they are. Excellent. Only thing I'm going to add is a couple of restaurants, rotation fees closed a while back because the owner at the time was getting elderly and the children and grandchildren, I think, wanted to sell 11 people went in and they sold it. Fellow bought it, was already operating a coffee kiosk in Orange, and he's going to open a coffee and bagel shop in Williamsville. Going to totally renovate the Tasty Foods building. And then our Champion Ice House Brewery at Old Memorial Hall downtown is going to open sometime soon. I don't know if this month or next month, but it keeps getting pushed back a couple of weeks. But that's understandable. But anyway, so we've got a couple of interesting spots, and hopefully both of one will have some live entertainment. Two boards are going to need that. We've got lots of great food. I'd like to also wait for an evening and have a drink, or just a drink and big poker, big coffee, but have a drink and enjoy some music. Or it can be beverages, but something to do in Gordonsville so you don't have to go to Charlotte, which most everybody does, because it's in Gordonsville. So anyway, little things happening. Let's go to the, can you see the folks on that?
Yeah. Ms. Smith, do you have anything to add for Rappahannock County for everyone here?
I don't want to take up too much of your time because I'm not sure how good my connection is, but I would just say that we seem to be working through some of the same challenges as other localities now, in particular in regards to broadband. We are looking at setting up a broadband authority and what that would entail and taking that on. And then for our particular locality, the other challenge that COVID has really brought forward has been the strain it's placed on our all-volunteer fire and rescue companies. So we continue to work through that and figure out ways to augment our volunteers, that we wouldn't have anticipated previously. So there's several things going on. We're doing a building study for our courthouse complex, and we also continue to work on our comprehensive plan and zoning ordinance updates.
Thank you. Yeah, I know from staff perspective, I know the fire and rescue conversation that comes up every 6 to 8 months around the table here. I know every other county in the region has dealt with it. I know there's some knowledge to be gained. Mr. McCullough from Coffee County.
Yes, we are currently, as everyone else is, expending our CARES Act money. A large portion of that has gone to the school system for computers, connectivity, and other matters. In addition to that, over the last few months, we've actually had a turnover of a number of positions. Our county attorney is retiring at the end of the week, and so the board has selected their deputy, his deputy, Tracy DeClaire, to be our new county attorney. Our budget director, I had elevated up to my deputy, and we have just hired a new budget director, Ann Hinton, out of Alexandria, will become our budget director. And so we're seeing a number of staff changes, which is a good thing, because what we're seeing is that those of us who are getting a little older are beginning to retire, and we're backfilling those positions now. So we've also just began our budget process for the next year. So we'll see how that pans out. So that's what's happening up here.
Mr. Heidman, council member.
Sure. Sorry I wasn't able to make it to be with y'all in person today. Actually, I had a major developer that reached out to me, and the only time we could meet was when I was planning on driving to Orange. But the developer wanted to look at potential large infill type projects in the downtown. So I thought it was a good opportunity for us to keep the dust off that housing study by meeting with him. So hopefully we'll be able to create some fruit from that project. We're milling and paving finally on Blue Ridge Avenue. We'll follow up with East Street and be working on side streets in the downtown. So a lot of activity associated with that paving over the next 3 to 4 weeks. John mentioned the grant programs that we're working on together. In addition to those, we also have a Culpeper Downtown Micro Marketing Leverage Grant that we've been working on with the downtown community. It's the time for our CALEA assessment for our police department, and that's currently ongoing. We as well have some staff turnover. We have a new planning director, Andrew Hopewell, and a new environmental services director, AP Brooks. And yesterday we received good news from Culpeper Wellness Foundation. They have awarded us a grant for $67,000 to construct an additional playground at Rockwater Park. We had actually been awarded that grant back in February, but when COVID hit, we encouraged them to take that grant back and keep it until they were sure that their finances could support, giving us that money. And they decided yesterday they could give us the grant, which I think is good news all the way around. That playground project is going to be about $150,000, and it's kind of a bridge between our splash pad for the very young kids and the extreme obstacle course for the very older and elite type athletes. We are advertising. We should be receiving bids shortly on our Route 522 road diet project. That's a couple $1 million project. And then we'll be following up on some transportation alternative sidewalk grant projects once we know who is the successful contractor for the road diet project, trying to get some economies of scale there. And during this past winter, we've purchased some property to try to help alleviate a parking need for the downtown. And I don't want to talk too much in detail about that, but we think that's really going to help us create some opportunities to do some infill projects, as well as potentially redevelop some of that property in addition to the parking, but also to put some additional development there, whether it's workforce housing or something else. We just started in kind of the planning phases of that project. I think that's kind of the highlights of kind of where we are right now, but like everybody else, very busy.
Okay, folks, thanks everybody for their input. I will say, as far as this space, my wife's been calling, most of them in Orange, but we've been here for 2 or 3 of the last 4 Thanksgiving. There's none of our houses hold at 50 or 60 people anymore, so we've actually been there for Thanksgiving. But anyway, if no one has anything else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. It sounds like we're adjourned.